The best of Money Matters. Wealth Tracker.
Welcome to the Wealth Tracker, where we dive into the uncharted territories of niche investment strategies that promise to redefine wealth. Hello, I'm Hongbin Jeong. Now, a recent BBC documentary, Disclosure, Hunting the Whiskey Bandits, has cast a harsh spotlight on the darker side of whiskey cask investment, exposing how hundreds of individuals lured by promises of high returns have been defrauded out of their life savings. With undercover reporting and months of investigation, the program revealed how fraudsters exploited regulatory gaps, fake documentation, and high-pressure tactics to sell overpriced or entirely non-existent casks. And as the scandal sent ripples through the industry, calls for transparency, accountability, and better investor protection have grown louder. So what needs to change? And most importantly, how can investors safely navigate the world of whiskey cask ownership? Well, to find out more, joining me now is Glenn Renaud Meijer, who is the managing director and co-founder at the Whisky Collective. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. Glenn, what was your personal reaction when you watched the BBC's investigation into whiskey investment scams?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it was deeply disappointing. I think even further than that, I felt genuinely heartbroken for the victims. You know, many of these individuals had invested in good faith. They often were using their savings or retirement funds, believing they were building something meaningful, and to see that trust shattered like that was painful. As a thought, I think this struck an even more personal chord because whiskey is our national product. You know, when I came to Singapore 12 years ago, that was what everyone I met asked me about, and it's part of our heritage and identity, and it represents generations of craftsmanship and pride, and just to see that legacy. So, as someone who had co-founded the Whisky Collective, we were building a business that was built on integrity and long-term value. So for us, very frustrating to see that these scams damage the reputation of our industry, which does have so much genuine potential.
Do you believe scams like these are, isolated incidents, or is this kind of activity more widespread than people realize?
I mean, that's a great question. I think it's what we see from our industry side is that really a handful of companies, and most of us in the industry know to stay way clear of them. We have had customers share their stories with us, and it's clear that these firms operate in a way that's harmful. Unfortunately, though, many victims don't come forward because I think there's often a sense of shame involved. Investment is seen as something sophisticated, and being misled can feel, very personal. So what we need is really more openness and accountability. That's going to be crucial in protecting future investors.
Well, how damaging then do you think these fraudulent operations have been for the reputation of wider whiskey investment market?
So I'd say that the whole industry hasn't been massively damaged, but it's certainly hurt those individuals. And again, that's where our concern always goes out to those individuals that have been affected. What really needs to happen is more people need to come forward. Those that have doubts or those that are sure something illegal has happened need to come in and call out these bad players, because without accountability of those companies being made public, I don't think a great deal is going to change. And look, trust is the foundation of any alternative investment, whether you're buying gold that stays in vaults or wine that's in bonded warehouses overseas. So when that gets eroded, we really have to look at ways of educating and making it clear to people. Because the operations, they don't just impact the victims, they also create a sense of skepticism around the market, which we don't want to turn away from all the excitement that this kind of valuable asset can be and make it a cautionary tale.
Do you think the industry has done enough to address the issue then, Glenn, or has it been too slow to act? Do you believe whiskey cask investments should be regulated more formally?
So I think any industry, whether we were talking about reforming banking or the wine industry or art or any others, it's always very difficult to change big industries like this quickly. And so what I almost feel is my view is that what's more important right now is education. We really want investors to understand what to look for, what questions to ask, and how to differentiate between a reputable business and a bad actor. I mean, this is why I was keen to join your show and take the opportunity to just raise more awareness and promote transparency in the market so that people can make informed decisions.
Definitely, definitely. If someone then, is considering investing in whiskey here, Glenn, what are the top 3 things they should check before parting with any money? I mean, what due diligence should investors do, before getting involved in Whiskey Cask, and what red flags should they look out for?
I mean, actually, to answer this question, I'm going to have to steal a bit more time and give you 6 things. I think there's actually 6 key things we need before ever considering buying a whiskey cask. So the first and foremost might seem a little bit obvious, but we need to sample the whiskey we're thinking of buying. So every cask company that's out there trying to sell whiskey should be able to offer clients a sample of the particular cask they're trying to sell. This is a great way for you to obviously decide what the quality is like. You can have a friend help you with that as well. That's obviously going to offer you insight into the potential of the whiskey if you're looking to age it longer. Now, any company that cannot provide you a sample, that should be your first red flag. The second thing I think every whiskey company should be providing is what we call a regauge report. Now, what that simply is a bit like going for a medical checkup. It tells us exactly the health of the whiskey cask. So it'll tell us the current volume and the alcohol strength of the whiskey. This provides assurance that the cask is doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of its maturing and how many bottles you would be expected to get at this point and in the future. Again, any company that's not able to give you this, you should walk away from. It means that they're not getting direct access to the cask, and that should be a red flag. The third is now moving on to where is the whiskey cask going to be. So every whiskey cask is going to be aging in Scotland, but we need to know exactly which warehouse. It should be in a reputable bonded warehouse, which has traceable links to the distillery, and you should be able to visit that cask. Of course, we're in Singapore. Going to Scotland is a good 14-hour flight away, but we should be able to know that if we were ever in the UK and we wanted to go and see our cask, we could do that. If you cannot do that, that also is a problem. Another thing I think a lot of these companies don't tell you about is the ongoing costs. So you have to make sure you understand what those ongoing costs are so that you know you're getting all the information about the investment, because obviously if the fees are high, that's going to affect the overall return on your investment. Second last, but probably the most important thing, of course, is the proof of ownership. Now, unfortunately, clients have come to us and shared with us that they have the wrong documentation. The most important piece of paper you can ever have is something called a DO, a delivery order. This proves that you, the buyer, own this cask and it's being stored in a particular warehouse. That is the most important piece of the paper you can ever have. Some people have receipts, some people have certificates. Those are not valid without this delivery order. So that's definitely the most important thing. And I guess finally also is the exit strategy. Like, you're buying this cask, what are you buying it for? Are you buying it to maybe bottle it in 5 years for, a celebration for your children, for your retirement, or are you looking to sell it on later in the market? You need to have those exit strategies. So make sure that the company that you're speaking with has an exit strategy other than just selling it to other collectors. This is often, again, a bit of a red flag because it's very vague and it's not really a good exit strategy on its own. It needs to be accompanied by other exit strategies. So that would be my 6 points for anyone interested in buying a cask.
Thank you so much for that. 6 points definitely will help those who are interested in, investing in whiskey cask here. But how can an investor then be sure the cask they're buying actually exists and is priced fairly? I mean, we've seen in that BBC documentary that people were buying and some of those whiskey casks didn't even exist in the first place.
Exactly, yeah. So that's a really scary part of it. So, of course, the best way you can ever know for sure is to visit the cask. Again, being in Singapore, that's not always easy. But that's where, again, you can ask that question about visiting your cask. If that's not possible, I'd say that is one of your red flags again. You can, though, of course, request photographic evidence, which should align with any proposal paperwork you're being sent. I've had a client who we actually did a FaceTime with our warehouse in Scotland, so he could see his cask and he compared the number on his documentation to the number there. So that's one thing we can do. I think the sample and the regauge report really help with that because, again, that would stop any of these bad players because they wouldn't have direct access either to a cask, of course, that doesn't exist or one that doesn't belong to them. So the sample and the regauge are 2 great ways to get a bit more proof that the cask is real. You can also ask this delivery order I mentioned. We can actually ask for a sample of that. So you could go through that, either check that with a lawyer or check that with someone else who's bought a cask before just to make sure that it matches up to what they should have as an industry standard. The other good thing we have is Scotland is very regulated when it comes to our warehouses. So we have this excise movement control system, which basically means we can trace the movements of any casks. So to share a story with you, one of our clients who is unsure if his casks are genuine or not, we've actually used this system to select those casks and find out exactly where they are. So within the trade, we're actually able to follow the movements of all casks. So that's something that you can check as well. You can come and speak with myself or one of my colleagues, and we can actually check the movements of the casks. That's something that's really important. So really all these checklist things that I'm giving you are just ways to sort of catch out some of these bad players, and any of them that are not able to provide what I've mentioned, there's definitely some red flags there. So, that's really what we have to all do, our own due diligence and make sure that we've gone through this checklist, because if we've missed any of those things, we could be at risk with one of these dishonest players in the industry.
But Glenn, with so many glossy websites and big promises out there, how can an investor, separate a credible company from a con artist? How do you identify legitimate businesses that are trustworthy? Yeah,
that's a great question. I mean, that's the problem now is we see the ads on Instagram and Facebook, and we things look fantastic. And unfortunately as well, the bad operators tend to have a lot of money behind them, because obviously the profits they're making on cheating people mean they can reinvest into their advertising. What I would say is, look, a credible company doesn't just look the part, it acts the part. So I'd say you definitely want to try and meet someone face to face, try and avoid going through this whole process just over the phone. It's great to do a discovery call and start a conversation, but you want to try and meet someone whenever possible. I think what you're looking for really in a credible company is going to be full transparency. So they're upfront about their ownership, their storage, insurance, bottling fees. There's no hidden charges. This is a great way to start asking these questions. You'll find out whether they're a genuine company or not. The warehouse access I mentioned, I think that's integral. Anyone who can offer that, that's really where we're going to run into problems. Ongoing updates. So just to share with you, one of the things that we do at the Whisky Collective, all our cask owners receive a complimentary bottle of their whiskey every year. This is for them to enjoy, share with friends, but also for them to see how their whiskey is aging. I think if you see that there's no communication after you've made a purchase, that's maybe also for you a red flag to check in with this company and see that they're the real deal. The no pressure sales. So you mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast that, there's this high pressure element where, this is our last cash, you've got to move quickly. This is definitely something that you want to take your time in. This is for a lot of people a passion purchase. They've been whiskey collectors for many years. This is something that they're perhaps buying for the future generations. I mean, I've bought a cask for my son. He's only 15 months old, so we've got a long time to go before he's drinking any whiskey. But we really want it to be something that is a decision that you don't take quickly. It's something you want to, of course, have done your due diligence on and make sure that you're comfortable before making any decision. And I say finally, it's just the exit strategies. I think any company, again, that's only saying to you, we'll sell your cask to other clients, that's a bit of a concern. So a legitimate company like the Whisky Collective, we actually offer multiple ways for someone to exit with their cask. One of them is we have a partner auction house called Whiskey Hammer. They sell casks as well as bottle with 0% seller fees. So that's one of the best ways to sell your cask in the future. We have a lot of contacts with independent bottlers. They regularly buy casks and do their own bottling to sell to collectors. And the other thing is we are seeing more and more growth from corporates who like to buy whiskey casks to then do a special bottling for their customers as a thank you gift. So that's something that we've got a nice network of that around Asia, so we can actually help sell casks that way. And then also just with other whiskey warehouses want to trade with us. So that's another great way for us to sell your cask. So I would be always a little bit wary of a company that says we've got a great collector network, that's who we sell to. That's only one way to exit selling a cask. So that's something just to be aware of.
Well, then what are the absolute non-negotiables that an investor should demand before purchasing a whiskey cask?
So I think I'll go over a little bit what I said earlier with the sample and the rebate report. I think the sample's probably the easiest thing. Anyone out there who's thinking of buying a cask, they've seen an advert online or they've received an email from a company, the great first way to test them is to ask them for a sample. And any response you get that says, oh, it's difficult, or the cask is, currently not accessible, this is your first way to start, to say, no, this is not for me. This person's not even able to provide a sample of the whiskey that I'm wanting to buy. The regauge report, your medical checkup, I think is another essential thing, because you want to make sure that what you're buying is very accurate at the time of purchase. So you want to make sure that the age statement, everything is correct. So that's very important. The deal, I mentioned the delivery order, is your most important piece of paperwork. So I would always ask for a sample of that, just to make sure that the company, first of all, knows what you're talking about, and secondly, can actually provide that. Again, if they don't know what you mean, or they're not able to provide a sample, that's another red flag for you. And then it's really about the warehouse details and the cask identification. So I would always ask for a photo of the cask. If you can't get a clear photo and you get these sort of generic pictures online of cartoon casks or lookalike casks, make sure every cask, I promise you, not only is it unique inside, but the outside as well, whether that be markings from the original distillery or everything else. So you want to make sure that the picture you get is not a generic one. Right. And finally, it's going to be the freedom of exit. I think do not be tied to any whiskey company that says you must do everything on our terms. Whiskey casks can move freely between other bonded warehouses. So you want to make sure that if you say to them, I'm thinking of perhaps moving my cask to somewhere else, is that possible? It should always be yes. So that's something as well to make sure you have. But again, the last, just as a final reminder, the gold standard of cask ownership is always the delivery order. And unfortunately, we have met clients who have never received this documentation. Right. That's always going to be the most important thing.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Glenn, for your time and your insights today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. That was Glenn Renaud Meijer, who is the Managing Director and Co-founder at the Whisky Collective. This has been the Wealth Tracker with me, Hongbin Jeong.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance. To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.